I wanted to talk a little bit about becoming a red-pilled on ego and ego grasping, maybe black-pilled. So one of the things I kind of predict, we already have red-pilled, these terms like being red-pilled on women, which is normally referring to Western women. One of the things I predict is a mass awakening on being red-pilled to egoism and sort of this unpalatable truth that most people are actually egotistical. One of the ways you can sort of see this easily is if you think back, anyone that's close to you, you normally can never convince them of anything you may have discovered. This is actually because psychologically, people, in order to keep themselves feeling good in a comparison process, in a process of comparison, they have to, basically, in order to keep themselves feeling good, they identify as being quote unquote smart, but unconsciously they think of it in a very cut and dry way. So it's as if you can't know anything. If you know something they don't, then it's, well, I'm not smart then. It's the reaction. So they don't want to accept that you know anything. So that's why you can't, usually people that consider you a peer or below them in like a peer status, you can't convince them of anything because they would never want to accept that you could know anything. Now, if it's something that they already know, then it's, if you tell them, you're not really convincing them of anything. If it's sort of in an area of something they already know, then it's, you can, explain something, say medical to them, if they have a lot of medical knowledge about how diseases and so on and so forth work, then it's, if they're already aware of these factors, then it's not going to really challenge their intellect at all, or it's not going to challenge their concept of what their intellect is. The study that pertains to all of this is Tesser's study in 1988, the self-evaluation maintenance theory, deals with this comparison process. And the two factors that he identifies are the factor of relevance and closeness to the individual. So the relevance is the activity or knowledge base area, how relevant that is to your identity. So if it's extremely relevant, like say you identify as someone that, oh, I'm really good at knowing medical stuff. I've studied that a lot. It has a high relevance. Now, when you meet someone, when you have a close friend that is into the same stuff, as is usually the case, that's high closeness. So if they succeed in something that has a high relevance to you, then it challenges your self-evaluation. It's actually lowered. So it's like as the theory goes, it's lowering your self-evaluation. So you seek to raise it. You can raise it by reducing the closeness, so you become more distant from that person, or you reduce the relevance. You identify less with that knowledge base in medical things, an example, and focus on something else. And that's sort of how you maintain your ego. Now, that's how the theory goes in accordance with the study. Now, I would take it just experientially, just based on experience. I would take it farther than that. Uh, and I don't know, I'm not a psychologist. I don't have any degrees in any of this stuff, so I don't know how to test it. But I would say, fitting with most people's experience and my own, there's something like um, an egotistical competition that usually deals with anything that's intellectual, because of the fact that most people unconsciously have to identify with being smart, or it's sort of a thing that they identify with, but they unconsciously have this sort of this concept, this conceptual model of themselves, that they are smart in a cut and dry way. So it's like like a dialectic of either or. So what I'm saying is, the difference between what my experience fits in Tesser's study is that people will tend to compete with you that don't even know you. So the closeness factor gets thrown out the window. It's usually, if you display some sort of intellect, even not trying to showboat anything, you just accidentally, you may use a word or something that's 2 or 3 syllables long, or that people don't actually know. It's an immediate challenge. They take it as a challenge to their intelligence, and they try to disagree with you just for the sake of not wanting to accept that you could know something. And so it's kind of a huge problem when it's the biggest blockade, I think, for people to learn anything, is this sort of ego competition. Like, one example of this you can see pretty easily is if you post a comment somewhere, and it gets a lot of likes, like say on any kind of social media, like maybe on YouTube or something like that, typically somebody will reply to disagree with you, and it's in such a way to where it's like non sequitur. Like, it doesn't, like, they're disagreeing with you, but they're not really even sure what they're disagreeing with. It's almost as if they just skimmed over the comment and didn't even read it, but they want to disagree with you because they don't want you to have the likes or something like that. But the fact that this sort of thing is so common, like, uh, it just speaks to this as being a phenomenon. I don't know. I'm probably not articulating myself very well, trying to explain this whole thing in a way that immediately may make sense to a lot of people. Or maybe I am. I don't know. It's kind of hard to gauge. But being in the truth community and all of that, looking at quote unquote conspiracy theories, you have to be open-minded in a certain extent, to a certain extent, and that level of open-mindedness is not the kind of open-mindedness of, well, I'm sitting on the fence and I'll accept anything. It's more of a big part of that is a degree of humility, to where you're humble enough to acknowledge that you probably don't know everything, and that your entire view of the world could be wrong. That humility allows you to have greater insight into things, instead of walking around like most people and just thinking you know it all. You know everything that needs to be known, and it's just sort of that's sort of the normies take on the world. But because of that, if they're if there's anything that they hear about that they don't normally deal with, they wouldn't want to accept that you could know anything. Anyway, this is kind of my first video where I've talked about something, so I'll leave it there. I don't know, maybe this is worth nothing and it's absolute garbage, but just trying some things out here. This is something I've been wanting to talk about for a long time. Not really sure if I can articulate it very well. Real quick, one last edit I wanted to throw in here, because I listened to this over again and realized I'm probably leaving a lot of stuff out. One of the common sort of misunderstandings I can see is coming out of this, where I didn't really explain myself too well. In these examples, when I'm saying people are disagreeing with you in those cases, it's evident that they're not actually disagreeing with you for a worldview-based reason, because they're not attacking the argument. They're not giving you an argument even. And a lot of times they're just reiterating what you've been saying in a different way, because they're not actually putting a great deal of effort or any sort of effort that you would expect if they had some kind of normal motivation that wasn't ego-based into comprehending what you said. That's how you can usually guess that their motive is mostly ego-based. So, like, for example, to be really specific, this is just one recent example I can just pull up in recent memory, is I talked about on a video regarding the occult and D&D and the occult, and sort of truth drops that could be released through the old Dungeons and Dragons books, as odd as that sounds. I kind of talked about the occult nature of the occult associations with the books, and how that was a thing for a long time during the Satanic Panic period. And in that comment, I kind of delved a little bit into all of that and what it means for something to be satanic, the sort of ambiguity of that term, as opposed to pagan and occult things. And I use the term Judeo-Christian model. Now, that term is typically used in a lot of comparative religious texts and anything dealing with psychology, religious studies, all that. The guy replies and takes umbrage with it, and with my usage of the term, saying that's an oxymoron, as he's Judeo-Christianity, quote unquote, is an oxymoron, is how he said it. So I said Judeo-Christian model, and then he right away tries to reply, Judeo-Christianity is an oxymoron. Now, in that case, what do you think is more likely? That he actually disagrees with everything that I'm saying on a worldview-based level, or that he's just trying to find something to disagree with, grasping at straws, because it's coming from a place of ego, and he doesn't like that comment got likes, or he just wants to, or he doesn't like that I use some term that he wasn't immediately, snap your fingers, immediately just aware of it right away. People can use an 8th grade level education to use context clues to get what a word means in a given sentence. But I think a lot of the times their ego doesn't want to allow you to elevate the conversation into a certain level. They don't want it to get to a certain level like that, to where either they have to think, or they feel like they're being challenged, like their ego is being challenged by your usage of words. Just the way that the ego grafts certain things to its identity, the way that you identify with certain things, I think, is more of a symptom of modernity rather than something that's intrinsically part of the human psyche or the way the human mind works. I think it's more of a symptom of culture and not necessary. So that's just one thing I wanted to add. Sorry if this ran a bit long.